everyone, we're going to do exploring angle pairs. Please copy adjacent angles. Adjacent means right next to each other. The definition is two coplanar angles with a common side, a common vertex, and no common interior points. For example, this angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent angles. Adjacent means right next to each other. They share a common vertex and common side. If you look at these two angles, they are angle 3 and 4. They share a common vertex and common side. If you look at this picture that I drew, here angle 1 and 2 are not adjacent because they have something in between. So they have to be right next to each other. Next thing we're going to do is vertical angles. Vertical angles mean two angles with the same vertex whose sides are opposite rays. Vertical angles are congruent to each other. For example, angle 1 and angle 2 are vertical angles. They are right across from each other and they actually are congruent, same. Angle 3 and 4 right here, those two are vertical because they are congruent and they're right across from each other. So they have same measurements. Next we have is complementary angles. Complementary angles are two angles whose measures add to 90 degrees. The angles are complements of each other, may or may not be adjacent. So you see I drew a little line here. It looks like 90. That's how I remember. If I draw a line after C, it looks like 90. So complementary is 90. So here are two angles. Angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary angles because they make up to be 90 degrees. This one is adjacent, but these two are not adjacent. They're just two separate angles. So 47 and 43, when you add them, they become 90. So those two are complementary angles. Next up, we have supplementary angles. Supplementary angles are two angles whose measures add to be 180. The angles are supplements of each other. May or may not be adjacent. How I remember. Supplementary angles make straight angles when put together. So S for straight angles, and straight angles have 180. So for example, this right here, angle 3 and 4 are supplementary angles because they are 180 together. When you add these two, it's on the straight line, and then these two are actually adjacent. Angle B and C are not adjacent, they're just two separate angles, but when you add them, they are 180, so they are considered supplementary angles. Next up is linear pair. Linear means a pair of adjacent angles, which means right next to each other, whose measures add up to 180. So any angles that are right next to each other, they are 180 degrees. We call them linear pairs. So linear pair postulate is if two angles form a linear pair, then they are supplementary. So right here you have angle ABD, CBD. These two angles are two angles that are right next to each other, and they make up to be 180 degrees. Finding information from a diagram. So when you look at a picture, when they give you angle diagram, just be careful about assuming info from a diagram. When you look at a picture, you can conclude from a unmarked diagram that the angles look adjacent, then you can assume the angles are adjacent. Angles are adjacent and supplementary, and angles are vertical angles. You can tell. But if you cannot conclude from unmarked means it doesn't have specific lines or measurement, then you cannot assume that angles or segments are congruent. It needs to have a those congruent like symbols or arc, like where they draw like little lines, same number of lines, or they have to have measurements. And an angle is a right angle. You cannot, if it's not marked, if it does not have a square mark or it does not have 90 degrees, that means it's not right angle. And then angles are complementary. Because it's right angle is complementary, you got to make sure it indicates specifically it's 90 or has a square mark. So these three things, you have to have a specific marks or measurement. But these three bullets, you can conclude if they look right next to each other, you can say they're adjacent, they are supplementary, and they're vertical. These, you don't need specific measurements. But these, you have to have some marks on the picture, on the diagram, okay? So let's try some examples with true or false. I want you to read 1, 2, 3 and look at this diagram, and I want you to answer, and then I want you to also answer number 4. So I want you to pause the video and try and write true or false and then name a pair of supplementary angles from this diagram. You can see this is 62, 118, and 28. So please pause the video and answer true or false and answer number 4. Pause the video. Here are the answers. Let's go over. Angle BFD and angle CFD are adjacent angle? False. They're not next to each other. CFD is part of BFD, so they're not next to each other. So it's false. Angle AFB, angle EFD are vertical angles. False. They're not across from each other. Number 3, angle AFE and angle BFC are complementary. True. Because 62 plus 28, when you add these two, even though they're not adjacent, they add up to be 90. So they're two separate, but when you add them, they are complementary. True. Name a pair of supplementary angles. So there are some choices here. Supplementary are 180. So you can write EFD plus AFE. Or, so they're on the straight line right here. Or you can do AFC plus CFD right here on the straight line. You can see the straight line. Or angle EFD plus angle AFE. So they're also a straight line. So there are some choices here. So please check your answers. Next up, we're gonna solve for x. As you can see, there are two adjacent angles and they're on a straight line. So what do you notice? Are they complementary or supplementary? They are supplementary because they're on a straight line, which is 180. So what can we use to find x? You can use this plus this equals 180 to solve for x. So you can write 2x plus 24 plus 4x plus 36 equals 180. And then you do combining like terms and you solve for x. Go ahead and pause the video and do your work here and check your answers. Pause the video. Here's the answer. 2x plus 4x is 6x. 24 plus 36 is 60 equals 180 because it's on a straight line. Subtract 60 on both sides. 6x equals 120 divided by 6, x equals 20. So you can use supplementary angle to solve for x. If I ask you to find the angle, you can just plug in 20 into each x and then give me an angle. And when you add these two, you should get 180. Example, two angles are complementary. The difference between 4 times the measure of one angle and 2 times the measure of the other angle is 210. Solve for each angle. How can I set this problem up? I want you to pause the video again, and I want you to use system of equation to solve this problem. I want you to give it a try, and then check. So please pause the video and solve for each angle. If you have a problem with this, you can just look at the answer and then I'm gonna explain. Pause the video and try. So I'm going to use system. System means x and y. So first I'm gonna make x the first angle, y the second angle. Two angles are complementary, so x plus y equals 90. The difference between 4 times the measure of one angle and 2 times the measure of the other angle is 210. So my first equation for the system is x plus y equals 90 because they are complementary angles. X is angle 1, y is angle 2. And then 4 times the first one, 2 times the second one, the difference means minus, equals 210. So this is my second equation. And I can use systems to solve for x and y. So these two are the setup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply each side by 4, 4, 4, just the top one. And I'm going to subtract. When I subtract, these two will cancel out. And then you're going to have 4 minus negative 2, which is positive 6y. 360 minus 210, I get 150. Divided by 6, I get y equals 25. Once I have one measurement, I'm going to subtract 25 from 90, I get 65. If this system is confusing, the setup, then you can actually change each one to y equals mx plus b and find intersection on your graphing calculator, and it's going to give you 25, where two lines cross and meet. Once you have y, you can find the x by subtracting from 90, or it will give you both x and y. So you can use the system of elimination to find the xy value. Thank you for watching the video. We'll do more practice in class.